I bet it does.
It does.
Takes a lot of energy for him to talk.
A lot of energy.
I get energy by talking.
I haven't took any souls, so it's like, it's kind of hard without my sight.
You can have these. You can munch on them.
They would just go down my bones.
Yo, Frank Dello Stritto, talk about movies.
Is this the right phone number for you, sir?
That's good enough for tonight.
Well, we've got a twofold interview with you tonight. Do you have time?
I have time for you.
Well, I want to talk about this book I got in the mail today, Vampire Over London.
All right.
We have the author of Vampire Over London, Bela Lugosi in Britain, by Frank Dello Stritto and Andi Brooks.
Yep.
Is Andy a guy or a gal?
Andy's the guy.
And A-N-D-I, that's an interesting spelling for a guy.
Yeah, when I first came into contact with him, I asked, the first thing I did in my email was say you were a man or a woman, and he was a guy.
Now, the book itself has a wonderful cover outside of the paper cover, which is an enlarged version of the paper cover. It looks like Big Ben
Yes.
and Big Bela.
Well, if you look at the cover, it's are you showing it on your
I'm holding it up. Yep.
It's Vampire Over London. That's the picture at the top, and then you got a little picture of Bela Lugosi in Britain.
Ah.
He is with the whole Parliament and the Big Ben and the London bus. So it all hangs together.
Now, Frank, I haven't read the book, obviously, as I just got it in the mail, but why didn't he stay longer in London?
Well, he went over there hoping for a comeback, and the plan was that he would play Dracula for a few weeks or maybe a month or two in basically tryouts, and then it would get into the West End, where it would, rejuvenate his career. The West End in London is like Broadway in New York. And it turned out he was there 6 months playing Dracula. 1/3 of the number of times he played Dracula on stage is on that tour. The only time he played Dracula longer at one stretch was when he was on Broadway in 1927. And it was never intended to stay on tour that long. The play just couldn't make money on tour. It could break even. Some weeks they made money, some weeks they lost money, but this was not a path to riches. So the plan was always to get it into the West End, where it would be a big production. That just never happened. Horror was somewhat out of fashion. There was a much more tendency to have newer stuff rather than retro stuff. So they just couldn't find a slot. And quite frankly, 6 months on tour drained him. He turned 70 right after that. So he was 69 the whole amount for the tour. But of course, 69 was a lot older in 1951 than it is now, and it really drained his health. We'll get into that a bit when we talk about the movie you're showing tonight.
Wow, okay.
What?
The movie tonight is going to be Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn gorilla. And that...
You want to talk about that a bit?
No, let's talk about that towards the end of the show.
What made him write this book?
He wrote this book.
What made him? What inspired him to make this book?
We have Death, the ghoul, sitting next to me. He wants to know what inspired you to write this book.
Okay, well, I had always known that Bela Lugosi spent some time in 1951 in Britain, and almost all of the interest in him is American. And you'd read these, and so all the articles, the books written about him were by Americans, and they basically said he went to Britain in 1951. Nothing much happened, then he came home. That's basically what they said. Well, he was there 8 months, and he couldn't live 8 months without a paycheck. I mean, nobody can, but Bela Lugosi was not wise with his money. And so I said he must have been doing something. So the story was he had gone there, played Dracula, it closed very quickly, and he was just waiting around. He made a very middle-budget movie, not a very cheap movie, but a middle-budget movie, Mother Riley Meets the Vampire, which is kind of a rip-off of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And then he came home. Well, it doesn't fill 8 months. So I'd always pondered this. And then Andy Brooks, who we only met once, and we never met while we were writing the book. The book was out for years before we ever met.
Whoa!
And And but he had an ad in a magazine asking, does anybody have any information on Bela Lugosi time in Britain? And I wrote to him. I said, yeah, I do. Here's what I've dug up over the years. And then I wound up being transferred there by my company. So I was living in Aberdeen, Scotland. And Andy and I decided, let's research this 8 months as much as we can to find out all we can. And this was going to be a magazine article. This was not going to be a book. But we kept finding things. We kept finding more and more information. Kept finding people that had worked with him. And then we have the theme. This was Bela Lugosi's last hurrah. He would never play Dracula on stage again. He could never work like that again. His age was catching up to him. He was not in good health. Most of your listeners will know that he would become addicted to his painkillers after this. But and he had to take the painkillers because he had these terrible leg pains. But he had to keep working. So he had to take it. And in those days, painkillers meant something pretty strong. For methadone, there was morphine. So he was taking morphine shots, and then methadone came along, so he started taking that. But he was dependent on that. He couldn't work without it.
Amazing. That's totally disheartening in some ways, but with thrilled that you did this work because, Frank, with all the video out there today, no one had videotaped these plays. Obviously, they couldn't.
There's very few photographs of it, not video. No, there's no video of it. He made the movie there. He made Mother Riley Meets the Vampire, which I guess is not in the public domain, so hard for you to show on your show right now. And the only other moving picture I'm aware of was that when he came back to America, there was a shipboard reporter who made a newsreel of him, which is if you get online, you can find it. You probably can even view it online. But that's the only recording of it. So there was that, and there was a handful of photographs which are in the book. And I wish they were better quality, but that's about all that exists. We kept hearing about this photographer taking a formal set of photographs, and we kept looking for a set. We found his daughter, and she said they might be in the attic, but they weren't. So there's not a lot of there's some photographic record of it there, but it's not a lot. It wasn't well documented in that sense.
How old was his daughter when he was over there?
Excuse me?
How old was his daughter?
Oh, he didn't have a daughter.
I thought you said you someone's daughter. You were checking the.
Oh no, the photographer's daughter.
Oh, the photographer's daughter. Got it. Okay.
No. Bela Lugosi had a son who was 13, but he was living with his grandparents in California. He never got over there. So well, we got into it, and there was just two. For a play, he always said he appeared in Dracula. It didn't last long, and he went home. But you would go to movie shows there, movie conferences there, and people would be selling old programs from plays that he was in. There was just too much evidence of it. And when you got into the memoirs, people from the 1951, they're writing their history, and they mentioned Bela Lugosi. Just too much record of it. So we started going week by week, town by town, and tracked him down, and found that he had played Dracula well over 200 times while he was there. And the big thing they needed to get into London never happened. Right. So in that sense, it was a failure. And like you said, it was disheartening, and it was disheartening because his health suffered. It was a real drain on him. But on the other hand, this was kind of a return to his youth because he started out basically touring the countryside in plays when he was a young man, and then because he moved away from that, and here he was in 1951, basically doing the same. They went all over England, and they went up to Scotland. They went over to Ireland. A different town every week. They would never had two towns in the same week, and this was pretty hard work for them. England was just getting back on its feet after the war, so the trains weren't as good as they should have been. So there was a lot of time between engagements. Sometimes they would get into town on a Monday morning and have to put on a play that night, and because they have to rehearse and get the cues right in that particular theater and all that. So it was I think it was exciting for him, but it was draining. He was when he was feeling good, he was quite elated on the tour. He was in good spirits and all that, but but the health would just overtake him. So the theme of the book is this is a great man's last hurrah. I mean, he's being consumed by his legend, and his legend is the only thing that's keeping him going. And he's giving it his all night after night, but he basically, if anyone reads the book near the end, he breaks under the strain. He has to end the tour. They could have gone on for more months. The producer, who was only 28 when this was going on, so he was still alive when we were researching the book, and I interviewed him quite a bit. He said he could have kept it going a lot longer. He always thought he had London just around the corner. He was always negotiating with the London theaters. He thought he had them, and then they renege, or the play that was going to leave didn't leave, hung around. It just never happened. But he thought he could carry it off. But Lugosi just couldn't keep up with it, so he had to bow out.
Now, Frank, people like you and I in this new millennium, we are what I call not only historians, but we are documentarians.
Okay.
And you've done an amazing job putting this together so that people can get more than a snapshot look, a really detailed look at his life. But if there were people like you and I in 1951, we would have went with a news company and gotten a reel of footage of him on stage. That's just what we would have done. I mean, that's obvious. It's a no-brainer. Somewhere, don't you think there might be some news footage of him on stage that someone taking? He's Dracula. It's a huge movie. Here he is in London. That's news.
The London Times. He was in Britain for 8 months. The London Times never mentioned it once.
Whoa.
The first, it's not like it was then. I mean, not like it is now. Culture trickled down from on high, and one of the things I've learned in my writings and researches about movies is that through the 20th century there was a war between culture that was handed down from the intelligentsia and culture that was pushed up by the masses. And in the newspapers he got good coverage on what we would call the scandal sheets or the tabloids, but the formal news media barely recognized him. He was interviewed on BBC Radio once, and apparently no recording of that survives. And no, I mean there was. I pray someone would say, "Hey, we made a film of Dracula, but it just didn't happen."
Wow.
You can't talk about British for that. I mean, how many Broadway plays of 1940 had any tapings made?
Right. Right.
I mean, Marlon Brando made a Streetcar Named Desire about that same time. Had he hadn't made the movie, there'd be no record of him as Stanley Kowalski, even though he played it on Broadway for a long time.
Just seeing the little advertisement in your book, Bela Lugosi in person. My God, can you imagine today? There'd be pandemonium.
Yeah. Well, that is weird about his public appearances. Sometimes they would catch fire. Big crowds would show up, and sometimes they'd be ho-hum affairs. They'd be lucky to get anybody to turn up. And and if you read through the book, there's times when that happens. Goes to they were big on country fairs in those days, and the theater got him a table. He'd sit there signing autographs, but he wasn't particularly overwhelmed by well-wishers then. But then a couple of pages later, you would read that he went into a drugstore basically to get some aspirin, and people mobbed him. Sometimes it caught fire, sometimes it didn't. Nostalgia was not in. The old horror movies were basically seen as nothing more than old movies people aren't going to look at again. So the high culture, didn't deign to even mention it. So it's a different world now than it was then.
The years have been kind to you.
Yeah, that's his opening line to Boris Karloff in that first movie.
Prophetic.
Just say this, for anybody who's getting interested in the book, this is an intense look at 8 months in Bela Lugosi's life, almost day to day, because we met so many people that were with him day to day, and it gets a real good look at what provincial British theater was like and what it was like to tour in there, and the tales we picked up. But to give some context, there's a chapter in the beginning which basically summarizes his life, and what you just read was the opening line. The years have been kind to you, which is what Lugosi's character says to Karloff's character when they first meet on screen. and basically saying it's been a lot rougher for me than it's been for you. And that wasn't true about their early lives. Lugosi probably had the cushier 1920s than Boris Karloff did, but it changed after that. Once Karloff became a success, it was Karloff who was riding high for much longer.
Boy, in 1947, he was at the Summit Theater in Cambridge, Mass. I would have been there with bells on. But of course, I was minus 7 years old at that time.
Yeah. Oh, I never knew how old you were. Okay, well, dangerous thing to do. Okay. Yeah.
Add 7 to 1947 and you got it.
Okay. He played Dracula a lot during the post-war years. He was up and down the East Coast. He played Massachusetts quite a few times. Pennsylvania, once in New Jersey, a whole bunch of times in New York and all that. These and sometimes these really caught fire, and they'd have him come back the next year. If he was in Arsenic and Old Lace one year, they'd have him come back a year later to play Dracula at the same theater, and vice versa. But sometimes they were kind of ho-hum affairs. They weren't good weeks. And the same thing happened on the British tour. It was hard to predict. Manchester, we got some tales about his week in Manchester. That was brutal. I mean, the reviews were terrible. The audiences weren't happy and all that. And then a week later, I forget what city it was in a week later, but then it turned around and all that. So it was real ups and downs. And again, that's the theme of the book. This guy is losing it physically. It's he's drained. He can barely keep up with it, and some weeks aren't too kind to him. But he's giving it his all. It's Dracula's last hurrah.
Wow. Tonight on eBay, I just purchased the original script to Dracula. So I'll have the script to play with in the coming weeks.
Okay, is that the Magic Image book, or is this the script to the movie or the script to the play?
It's a script of the play, I believe, and it's, I'll find out. It is a book, and it's got other things inside it, but I'll let you know when I get it. And I only bring that up because I want to know, is the play that was on stage in Britain substantially different from the Universal picture?
Yes, the Universal picture claims to be adapted from the play, but if you read the play, you're pretty far into the movie before you see anything that looks like it. You've seen the movie, right?
Oh, the original Dracula?
Yeah.
Many times, yes.
Okay. The play never takes place in Transylvania.
Right.
The play opens in London. If you remember the movie, it starts in Transylvania. Dracula comes to London. He meets Mina Harker at the opera. Then maybe 5-10 minutes after that, it starts to pick up where the play is. So the latter half is I guess adapted from the play, close to the play. But the first half and the best part of it, the scenes in Castle Dracula, had nothing to do with the play. So it was a co-adaptation of the novel and the play.
So did the British play go along lines of the American play?
Well, actually, it was the American play. The version that played in Britain, and that may be what you bought online today, because the British version is in print and can be bought. But the version that was in that Lugosi came to London was the American version. That was part of the publicity. For the first time in Britain, Bela Lugosi's in his version of Dracula. Dracula this is 1951, so Dracula had been playing in Britain up and down in the theater since 1924, so that was not a new gig. So in addition to saying we have Bela Lugosi, they could say we have a newer version of Dracula. The British version, I guess, was cornier. Some of the dialogue, when you read it, you'd be glad you didn't have to say that if you were an actor. Of course, the American version is no great theater either. But they are different. I think that the American version is shorter and it's a bit tighter. But they both played best when they were done a bit over the top. I mean, if you took them too seriously, they kind of got heavy. You had to keep the pace going, and you had to put in some chills where you could. And they would always have gimmicks, doing something to really excite the audience. there's a scene in the 1951 play that I talk about quite a bit, that Lugosi would put his cape on and he'd wrap his arms around himself, and they would pump like a smoke underneath his cape. And then when he'd enter, you couldn't tell anything, but when he opened his cape in that bat-like pose, the mist would just pour off him. And when that worked, it was spellbinding. I mean, the audience would gasp and all that. As I say in the book, there was one week when they were out on the road, they couldn't get the usual feedstock they had to make the mist, so it was a different concoction. When he opened his cape, it did not fall to the ground like it was supposed to. It hung in the air, and the actress who was opposite him took a good whiff of it and passed out. So I have a lot of tales like that through the book, because we were fortunate to meet so many people that appeared on stage with Lugosi that could tell us the behind-the-scenes stuff. And that's really why the book is worth reading, because we got into the dressing rooms and behind the scenes to see what people were up to there, who was happy, who wasn't, who had problems here and there, what Lugosi was like when he didn't think anybody was watching him. So we really dug into the character there.
And you even have the 1912 obituary of Bram Stoker.
Yeah, well, that we found out, every author has this problem. When you're doing the research, you find a lot of stuff you'd love to get in the book, but you say it just doesn't belong here. If I get it in there, it'll just weigh things down. So the Bible that we went to document a lot of the bare statistics of what was going on is the British version of Variety.
Okay.
Which is called The Stage. I mean, that is the theater magazine of Britain, and they would cover everything every week. And when I was going through there looking for Lugosi, I'd find all sorts of things. So there's an appendix in there that says the history of Dracula is told through the pages of The Stage being the magazine. And there's something in there on the first time Dracula was staged by Bram Stoker. And it wasn't a theatrical performance. It was a performance that was necessary under the copyright laws to protect his copyright. And then he died. They gave him an obituary. Hamilton Dean's obituary was in The Stage. Hamilton Dean was the author of the original Dracula play. He adapted it from book to stage. And his name. If you watch a Dracula movie, there's a good chance you'll see his name in the credits as based on the play by Hamilton Dean.
So having his obit is amazing.
Excuse me? I
think it's essential.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So, I mean, it's a good appendix. You learn a lot from that. And in the back, there's also a list of all the stage performances of Bela Lugosi that I knew of at the time. But I think it came to like 770 or something. But now I found a few extra ones other people have, and they have shared that with me. So the list now is up in the 800s. I'd like to get it to 1,000 to say Bela Lugosi played Dracula on stage 1,000 times, but I don't think I can do that. I still need 180 to go, and that's a lot of performances to be missing, and just aren't that many gaps left to fill. So I think we're going to stay somewhere in the low 800s as the total number of times Bela Lugosi played Dracula, which, when you think about it, is not a lot. I mean, Yul Brynner played King and I a lot more than 800 times. Most actors or actresses that have a signature role on stage have played it a lot more than Bela Lugosi played Dracula. But that's always one of the strange things about him. He is so identified with a role. He didn't play all that often. On the movies, he only played Dracula twice, and he played another real vampire only once. But everybody thinks that he made so many vampire movies, but he just did not.
Well, it's like what they call one-hit wonders. They often have these large and wonderful careers, but people only know them by the hit. People know only Bobby Hebb by Sonny.
Yeah.
He had 4 legitimate hits, really a 5th bubbling under, and a very, very wonderfully rich career.
Yeah. Well, I mean that is one of the threads that runs through the book is the curse of typecasting.
Right.
And I mean we see that a lot more today probably than in Lugosi's time because of television.
You got it.
You see the same actor in the same role night after night, And no matter how much you think about it, you turn on the TV, you see a show, and one of the Seinfeld characters comes up in a different role, and you just can't get Kramer or George Costanza out of your mind, because they are so identified as that.
And some of these people don't get typecast because I have no idea what Justin Kardashian or Kim Bieber look like.
Okay, I think you said those names backwards.
I did them intentionally.
Okay. Well, I do know what they look like, but that's because I see them at the checkout counters when I'm waiting to pay. The magazines are always there.
I don't even look.
And I'm not going to badmouth them. And,
no, I'm not badmouthing them. I'm just saying it's instant fame. I saw Justin Bieber bubbling under when the news reports started happening because I have a friend named David Bieber who is a media cultural guru here in Boston. So we still kid him to this day about Justin Bieber because he is Bieber to us, the real Bieber. But, Kim Kardashian, I couldn't tell you her from Jessica Simpson. I don't think Tony Romo could either.
Okay. All right, well, one's dark and one's not. That's all you got to know.
I don't know these things. I just don't know who they are. But that being said, what I'm thinking now is, let's get back to Bobby Hebb. I go on eBay, and while Bobby was alive, we were finding a lot of things on eBay, like acetates of an album of his that was lost, the recordings. Maybe on eBay, if you religiously look, maybe some film footage will show up because it's a little different than when you were hunting and pecking without eBay.
Yeah. Well, I do religiously look. I put in Bela Lugosi at least a couple of times a week.
Wow.
And tap on the newly listed option, and I'm not looking for things to buy. I'm looking for history. People will sell all theater programs, and not that I want to buy the program, but I want to see the date and where. When you got to nail the facts down. And there'll be letters from him on there, and occasionally, you'll go months on end without seeing something, and all of a sudden something will pop up. There'll be a handbill from something he was appearing in, or something that will tell you something about the man, and that's what I'm looking for. And I recommend, I recommend the internet to anybody that's doing research on a famous person, but eBay, you never can tell what's going to pop up there. So you put it in and hope. Just put it in every day. It doesn't take any time, and see what's listed, and you'll learn something someday about them.
What's amazing is we put Bobby Hebb's name in, and I would find his main photo, the publicity photo, was used a bunch of times, at least a dozen times in different ways. They might enlarge it. They reversed it so it looked like he was a left-hand guitar player when he wasn't. They would tint it blue. They'd use it for a 45 cover. So we found all sorts of variations on the Bobby Hebb publicity photo on eBay. We would never have known it without eBay.
Yep.
And now we have those photos,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right.
That being said,
we've the movie, or you want to talk some more about the book?
Nope. We got 9 minutes left, so that was my next phase. You have a website, and the website is.
The website is just put Cult Movies Press into a search engine, and you'll find it.
Cult Movies Press. Frank Dello Stritto, you can write him. Great guy. He's on here every week.